On this episode of Driven Too Far, we're talking about CDL training and what you need to know before you dive into the industry. Hello, I'm Andrew Winkler, and this is Driven Too Far, the truth about trucking, a podcast that helps over-the-road truck drivers balance career and family. Welcome back to this episode of Driven Too Far, the truth about trucking. Today, we're joined by Ed Lewis and Ryan Cook from Northeast Community College in Norfolk, Nebraska, and we're talking about CDL training. Well, guys, welcome to the podcast today. I appreciate you joining me here today. Today, we're talking about CDL schools, and you're from Norfolk, Nebraska, and you two are the instructors at Northeast Community College. Is that right?
That's correct.
Well, tell us a little bit. How does somebody interested in getting their CDL, how do they go about? Where do they start with that process?
Yeah, first place is to usually get a CDL learner's permit, commercial learner's permit. CISCA, get the CDL manual from the DMV or one of us instructors and study with that. And they can usually call me or get a hold of me. I'll give them some, Ryan and the instructors out there, we'll give them some ideas on how to study for the learner's permit.
So they actually have to take a small test for the learner's permit too. Is that kind of the written side of it, I assume?
Yes.
Before they do that?
The general knowledge, air brakes, and combination.
Okay.
Yep.
And how about, I know CDL drivers obviously have to have a physical and stuff. Do they have to have anything like that before they get a permit?
Not the permit, no. Eventually they will need to have their DOT medical card.
Okay.
But it is not required for the permit unless they categorize themselves as a Category A driver, a driver that would want to leave the state or travel all 48 states.
Okay.
Then a medical card would be required to get the K restriction removed from the learner's permit.
Okay, gotcha.
Usually coming through school, the K restriction will work for the school because we're usually going to stay in state for the most part, and they can worry about getting the physical then at that point and get that removed.
So once they've got the learner's permit, have they already enrolled with the school at that point, or do they apply, or how does all that work?
Ideally they get to us with a learner's permit. As far as getting into the class, it's a matter of getting a hold of the admissions office, figuring out what classes are open. Right now, we're booked till April, maybe May, as far as our professional course goes. So, and then getting the right time slot that's going to fit their life. Sometimes they're working themselves out of their day job so they can get into our day class, and that's kind of a big deal. I got to give them my 2 weeks, so I can't start this particular class, so I need to look at this one or this one down the road.
In your particular school, is it a 6-week class? Am I remembering that right?
Yes, it's 6 weeks long. So
as a student, if I'm interested in getting into this, I'm probably already working the day job, like you said, and then am I going to have to go without pay, without income for 6 weeks? Is that what most students kind of are up against?
Yeah, we do have the rare students that sign on with a company. The company is basically a sponsor to them, and sometimes that company will agree to pay them an hourly rate while they're at class.
Okay.
With the guarantee that they'll typically put in about a year with them after school.
Okay.
But those are rare. There are a lot of students that still try to work the weekends, night shifts,
part-time jobs, anything they can do to try to keep some income.
We had one student that was doing Diner Dash and down here in Omaha at night.
Yeah, and there's homework to the class. They have to study, so it's not just to show up for class. There's homework we send home with them. We have them. There's study time outside the class they have to do.
So do you think that whole idea where they don't have income for up to 6 weeks, does that really hamper students actually getting into the program? Is it kind of a deal breaker for a lot of students once they kind of figure that out?
I think it is, yeah. A lot of them, they have young families, young children, and to go 6 weeks without a paycheck, I couldn't do it. I don't know if Ed or you could do it, but that is a big deal.
Certainly.
And so they hopefully they've got some of those kinks ironed out before they get to us. A lot of students do save prior to getting to us, so they have a little bit of a nest egg to keep them afloat while they're there.
Okay. I heard you mention that in some cases anyway, there's sponsorships available, probably from trucking companies, I assume, or companies looking to hire CDL drivers. How many of your students are actually sponsored when they come in, or at what point do they go out and kind of find that job?
I would say we have very few that come in pre or sponsored.
Okay.
Throughout the 6-week process, though, we're constantly trying to get them to at least start the application process, even if they know that the company may not be a perfect fit. At least they've got their name in the hat. They've got the what I would consider like a pre-hire done. And so when the 6 weeks is up, after seeing the recruiters that we have come in and then visiting other trucking companies, they can make a good, honest decision on what direction they want to go, and then have it narrowed down. Okay, I've got A or B here. This is what I'm going to go with. I can start orientation on Monday.
That's, we work really hard on that during class for them to find the job during class, and that way we're there. Ask us questions. Why is this a good fit for me? Why is this one not?
That's good. I remember back in the day when I went through CDL school back in 1995. I'm not sure they did that. It was almost like you went through the school, then you worried about where you were going to go to work. But I'm glad to hear that you guys are trying to educate them as you go through your own personal experiences of what to expect. So let's jump on that topic for just a minute. First of all, what can a student expect the 6 weeks while they're in school? What does that look like?
Oh boy, it can be pretty intense. Those first couple weeks, there's a lot of documentation, a lot of paperwork that we do. And like Ed mentioned earlier, the homework. Sometimes it's overwhelming. After it seems like towards the 3rd week, they kind of start settling into their routine. A lot of guys come in thinking, well, we're just going to be at the truck all day. And that's not the case. We've got quite a bit of classroom stuff that we do, certain topics that we cover. I think our textbook is about 35 chapters long. All that has to be covered.
Okay.
So there's a lot of stuff, and it's not just at the trucks.
So it's not just hands-on stuff. There's a theory part of it where they have to go back and understand the regulations probably.
Right. We try to blend that pretty good too. I mean, 2nd and 3rd day, we're trying to get to the trucks, part day. So it's not boring classroom all day long. We're getting them out there. So if we start talking about brakes and you've never seen them before, we're wasting our breath. That's why we want to get them out to the trucks and show them this is what we're talking about, and blend the two together.
Very good. I'm curious to what you guys have seen over the years. I'll talk a little bit about the success rates of students, as they come through your program and stuff. How many of them are actually going out and getting jobs in the industry and then sticking with it? And if they're not, what kind of roadblocks are out there? What are they running into?
I would say one of the biggest roadblocks for the students is they get out there and it's not what they thought. I think there's a misconception that it's the open road and it's this great big grand deal where I'm my own boss and nothing to answer to, and every day I'm going to see a brand new site,
a brand new mountain or something.
Right? and it's not the case. And so, and that first year is a pretty lonely year. That's a huge lifestyle adjustment. And so, a few months in, this just isn't it, or they got with a company that just wasn't a good fit for them, and then they pull themselves out. Sometimes they don't go back to trucking at all.
Is there anything they could do to prepare themselves for that? I mean, how do you set them up for success, and what could we do as industry professionals to help them?
I'm brutally honest with my students. I mean, this is what you've got to expect. It's not all sunshine and roses.
Stop sugarcoating it.
Right.
Yeah.
And you've got to have your entire family on board. I mean, I know what it was like to be a young father, husband, and out on the road. It was probably the hardest part of my whole career. A 6-month-old daughter at home. And if mom ain't happy, nobody's happy. But you're 1,000 miles away and you can't fix squat. So, I mean, it's and that was hard on me.
Right.
Because as much as I wanted to fix it, I'll see you when I see you. I'll call you tomorrow. That's about all I can tell you.
Yeah.
I went over the road, met my wife. We came off the road for a while, and then I was going back to driving, and that's when I moved her and my family back to her her hometown, so she was near her dad. Simply because if something goes wrong while I'm on the road, her dad's there to step in for me where it needed.
So they've got to have a support system.
Absolutely.
Is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it all depends on where you're at in your lifestyle too. For single guys like me, I was out 7 weeks at a time and loved it. For other guys, I see a lot more of the industry turning more towards the family. Gone 1 week, home every weekend. back when I was out there, we weren't home every weekend.
Right.
And I'm seeing that more and more now.
And I think I went through that myself when, as a single guy, when I got my CDL and stuff, always wanted to drive the trucks, right?
Yeah.
And get out there and see some great places. I ran the East Coast, I ran the Southeast, and got to see some cool things I'd never seen before. Then you meet somebody, somebody comes into your life and things start to change, and it's really, you get pulled in different directions because you still love the road and your job, but there's pressure to be home. And that's kind of where that was the point where I had to make a decision. Am I going to stay on the road or am I going to get off the road? And I was lucky enough to be able to stay in the industry that I love. So.
Right. I know we've had students actually end up getting a divorce. I mean, that decision couldn't be hashed out between husband and wife or the family members, and the whole family structure broke down. And so, and then they come off the road to try to
fix it. And sometimes it's not fixable.
Right.
Yes.
Sometimes they end up back on the road. Sometimes they just end up being more local, spend time with their kids.
I've seen that happen over the years too, where the driver comes off the road to try to be with the family more, and take the local jobs and stuff. Then it's an issue of probably not making the money the family was used to making. So you just created a different issue, really. So.
Yeah, and I know up there, some of the companies I see too, where you can either stay local or stay out. To me, if I want to sleep, I was always staying out. So I fortunately, some of the companies you can be home and be gone at the same time, flip-flop back and forth, depending on which load you get.
Yeah, so the local jobs, and that's something I've seen too, is the local jobs themselves, you think that sounds great. Oh, I'm going to be home every night, sleep in my bed every night. Mm-hmm. But it's not that way necessarily, is it?
No, by the time I would get in off my run, I'd shut down, I'd grab my stuff. I still had to drive home, see the family, have some supper, get a little bit of sleep, and I had to get back up, get ready, and get back to the truck. Maybe I was getting 4, 5, 6 hours of sleep out of my 10 hours off, but if I stayed out overnight, I'd get 8, 9 hours of sleep, because once I parked, I was off, got my sleep, and good to go. So, yeah, there's a balance. There's a trade-off, definitely.
That's one thing I always tell my students. You think a local job means all this glorious home time, but it doesn't. You put in a 14, 16-hour day. You get home, you get a bite to eat, you shower, and you got to get your hind end to bed so you can start it all over again. And you don't start at 8, 9 o'clock in the morning. You're starting at 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning.
That's
so
right,
it's long days. Yes, you get to sleep in your own bed, but the quality's not there. The home time that I think everybody thinks about, dad's kicked back in the recliner, everybody's watching TV, and that's not the case. They don't see you, and you don't see them.
And I remember walking into CDL classrooms when I was out trying to recruit and stuff. And I just asked a question: how many of you are looking for OTR jobs? And it was very few that raised their hand. How many of you are going to try to stay local? It was the bulk of the class. But I think in their mind too, they still felt like they were going to make these big dollar signs and stay local. And the two just don't necessarily match up.
I would say a local driver, you're going to take about a $20,000 a year hit as compared to an over-the-road driver. You still going to have a lot of those same expenses that an over-the-road driver does. You still got to eat and all that stuff during the day, but the pay just isn't there. It has come up, but the pay just isn't there for the local gigs as it is for even the regional or over-the-road.
Yeah. And that's always been the trade-off in trucking, was the home time for the dollars. It's which one do you want more?
Yeah.
That's one nice thing I like about truck driving. It's so diverse. Once you get CDL, you get the experience. You can move back and forth to fit your lifestyle.
Right, and that's where fitting yourself with a company that will allow that. All right, I got some stuff going on this week. I got some ball games or concerts I need to see at school. I'm going to stay around here. But after that, I want to be gone for a while. And having that flexibility within a company, I think is a huge seller to students. I'm not signing up to be gone for 6 to 8 weeks at a time just to get 2 or 3 days off. If I don't feel like going all that far or doing all that much, I can cater it more to what I've got going on at home. And I think that's just a huge selling point to anybody. You're not taking that leap of faith and diving into the deep end and not knowing when you're coming home. You have more control over it. And that's the way the industry's going, is they're giving more freedom to the drivers. If you do want home time, we're going to get you there.
How critical is it for the students as they become professional drivers to find the right fit in a company? And then how do they go about finding that fit?
One thing, ask other drivers, figure out how much time, talk to your family around you, say, how much time can I be gone? And understand, like I said, if, like Ryan said, if you're home, you're not going to be, home a lot, but you're still home. How much can I go? What do I want to do? Do I want to, pull flatbed, which requires more work? Do I want to run reefer, drive in, dump box? That has a lot. How much out in the weather do you want to be? And like I said, just simply going around asking the other drivers, research.
Well, and I think that's good advice, because I'm thinking, as you're talking, I'm thinking about, if I'm a new driver, how much can I trust recruiters in the industry? Because let's face it, their job is to bring you into the company. And I would hope they wouldn't, falsely tell you a bunch of stuff on purpose just to get you through the door and make their numbers look good, because ultimately you're probably just going to end up as a turnover figure for them, right? Mm-hmm. So I hope they're have more integrity than that. But it's certainly an issue, I think.
All right. And with Ed and I's varied backgrounds, I was in ag most of my career, all my career. He did reefer and tanker, and I've got some tanker. But all of us instructors have a little niche area of the industry, and so we can not select the student, but we can get, okay, you don't want to go that way. You want to go more this way based off of what you're telling me. This is more the path that you need to get down, and here's a few companies that I would look at, and always do your research.
Right.
I mean, that's something that we stress to them. You've got to do your research, talking to other drivers, getting on the internet. Don't just take what the recruiter says. You've got your due diligence to make sure that when you get out there, you can at least give that company 1 year.
And that's one thing there's 4 of us instructors, and that's one thing with us being diverse. If they come and talk to any one of us, they start talking, we'll say, hey, if they're talking to me about ag, I say, go talk to Ryan or Terrell. I've seen it, I don't know.
That's their expertise. Absolutely. That's their background. They can give you better guidance.
You want to talk to LTL, go talk to Chris. He's done that, Reefer and over the road, yes, I've done that.
Let's talk a little bit about a driver's first year in trucking. What should they expect? Do you feel like that's probably the toughest year of their new career, is that first year? And what are they running into?
Well, first of all, you're not going to make the money. You're still figuring things out. I mean, no matter how much that we do, and we do a lot of trip planning and map reading where the students physically have to plan longer trips. But once you're out there, you still have, you still got to get out there and get your own feel for it, your own groove. And while you're doing that, you're not making as much money as maybe the recruiter promised you. And then there's that lifestyle shock. I don't care how much you think you want to live in that truck. It becomes a small coffin at times. And I think that really wears on them too. And just the loneliness. But that first year is definitely financially, mentally, the hardest year you're going to have. And particularly, I think the first few months.
Yeah.
With all new technology, it's easier than when we were out there.
Yes.
You got FaceTime, you got, internet, phones. And I suggest, use all that, all the above.
We were back in the day when we stood in line at the truck stop to get into the phone booth.
We did.
And they had these small little tiny phone booths you actually sat in and closed the door, and you called collect home. And that's
you always felt like you had to get off because there's like 5 other guys waiting for you
waiting to call mom. Yep.
And we walk in the restaurant and there's a phone at every table. Now to find a table it's empty, they had the phone.
I wonder if there's any truck stops still out there that have those just for retro purposes. That's great.
I haven't seen one for a long time.
Yeah.
But yeah.
What else about the first year? How do we help prepare them, I guess?
One thing, don't get frustrated.
Yeah.
There's I've been driving over 30 years. There's days that they pay me way too much money to drive, way too much. There's other days they don't pay me near enough.
Right.
And they just have to balance out. there's days after a while, I love crossing Wyoming. After a while, it becomes a job.
Yeah.
But in the end, it's still worth it. Still love it.
Yeah, keep an open mind. If you are with a trainer for any amount of time, really pay attention. That guy knows what he's doing. I don't remember, I never went through a major city with a trainer. I would flying by the seat of my pants, scared to death, which also adds to that stress level that you have when you're out there. So pay attention when you're with those trainers. Have them take you through the mountains. Have them get you into those big inner cities. At least you've got somebody there to tell you, and you're not just going in blind.
Yeah, I highly suggest, if at all possible, the new driver should be going over the road for the first year. Like Ryan said, get that trainer with you. Go to New York, go to Chicago, go to LA. You get that over the road experience, you're going to be a better driver overall.
In my day, I think I always thought of how it worked was you put in your time over the road. That's where you kind of, and then the better jobs in the industry were maybe some of the LTL, the dedicated, the home
Absolutely.
every night type things and stuff, but you had to put in your time in the industry before you would even be looked at for some of those other jobs. Do you think the students coming through today have a misconception of that, and or do they think they're just going to go straight to the top, straight to the best jobs?
Yes, and I hear a lot. I want to go local so I can figure out. I want to learn how to do it just around the local city, around Norfolk, and then I'll go over the road.
They never make it, do they?
No,
They never go over the road.
That's a backwards way of thinking.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that.
Yeah.
In some companies, they may require the 1 to 2 years over the road. Well, you've spent 5 years, 10 years as a local driver.
It don't count.
Yeah, it doesn't count. We don't want you. We want somebody that's actually been out there. And I always tell them, you go get that year in, you hunker down, you get her done, and then all these other doors are going to open for you. Endless possibilities will open up for you, but you have to make that sacrifice. As bad as it is, you still have to make that sacrifice. It's going to be better for you in the long run.
How important is it for them to find the right fit and then stick with that first job?
Companies don't like job hoppers. They don't like that.
No, but I think one recruiter told me $2,000 to maybe $5,000 to put a new driver through a training process.
Oh yeah, I would say in our case it's probably closer to 6,000 to 8,000.
I mean that's a lot of money, and in a lot of companies they do look at that. They do look at your past driving. If you've had 6 jobs in a year, are they going to invest that money into you? Probably not.
At the same time, they do understand you're a new driver. Maybe your first choice wasn't the best.
Right.
So, one job, okay.
Yes.
But then you still got to get down there. You got to stay with it, though.
Kind of got sucked in by a real slick recruiter, or the bright shiny stuff we call it that they think they want. But yeah, you're absolutely right.
And that's what we try to. Okay, I know it looks good, but I don't think you want to go down that path. These guys maybe not offering quite as much money, but I think that company is a little bit better fit for you. You can't just look at the dollar signs right now. You've got to look at what the year's going to be like to get to that, and understand that the dollars are not always going to be there like they say. But if you hate what you do and you're still not making money, are you going to keep working there? No, you're going to go over here where the grass is greener.
Yes.
And I'll say this too, there's some months I've made a lot of money. There's a lot of months I didn't make it very much money. So when I was asking recruiters, how much will I make in the year? Because I understand, January, February, March, we're not making much.
It does slow down in the industry. Yes, it does.
And we have to understand that it's going to slow down. So what am I going to make overall throughout the whole year? Because we're going to have the ups and downs.
Yeah, and that's a good question for recruiters. Are we busy year round? Is it going to be just my paycheck's going to just tank for a couple months, or do we have, or is this a reputable enough company where the work never drops off?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And a lot of times recruiters touch on that, but that's something that we try to point out to students. Hey, these guys are doing this. They're probably not going to have too many low areas as far as loads are concerned throughout the year, which is better for you. If there's work to do, you're always going to have a good paycheck.
How about you think about the students? Are they scared about holidays and important events coming up? And is that one of the reasons maybe they try to stay local so they don't miss some of the family events? Or
yes and no.
Is it in the back of their mind?
Sometimes they aren't even thinking about it.
Yeah.
I'll tell you from experience, I was running local, and they still, regulations say we can run 14 hours in a day. So most employers expect us, they want to get the most of us out of us. So 14 hours a day, and I come home, I've got a couple holiday concerts. My kids were young, so 2-3 of them in a week. Now I'm down to how many hours of sleep am I getting? Yeah, I'm staying local, but I'm running low.
Right.
Yeah, I think they think more about home time and what they're going to miss for the kids. I don't know that it 100% sinks in that you're going to be long ways away on Christmas morning, and you probably don't realize just how lonely that part's going to be. You're sitting at a truck stop with hundreds of other drivers, and you're going in and paying for whatever meal, and knowing that your kids are back home opening gifts and the family's
it's
all together.
The guilt, man. The guilt's a killer.
Oh,
for
yeah.
sure.
Kind of what I did too. I picked which holidays I was going to be home, because I know that not everybody can be home for every holiday. I said, okay, I went to dispatch and I said, these are the holidays I want to be home. The rest of them, I'll be out. Work me. Let someone else go home. I'll work. Let's trade off.
I talk about this with veteran guys as well, but you can't underestimate the power of that relationship with your dispatch or your operations team and the communication. And you don't have to wait to be a veteran or senior driver to start that. You start building that relationship right away, and things are going to go so much better for you.
Yeah, and I've been on both sides. I've been dispatcher, I've been manager, I've been driver, and there's times the dispatcher's handed 20 loads. These all have to move.
Yes.
There's 2 or 3 of them here that they're rotten loads. They still got to move. And I had a good enough relationship with dispatch. I said, if you got those, you got them. But you better tell me up front that that's what it is. And I'd take the rotten loads and then just make sure I get a good one.
I think that's the key to the communication. And I've preached that for a long time with all drivers, was the better relationship and the sooner you start to communicate with your dispatcher, the better chance you have to stay away from those rotten loads. Because you know what? If you're a good communicator, they're going to give it to you. They know they can count on you, and you're going to take it. And
sometimes what they call a rotten load, I looked at it and went, well, that's nothing. Oh, please give that one to me.
Yeah.
Like I said, if I knew up front, I could deal with it.
Yes.
I know some drivers in the past, nope, not doing it, not going to do it. You already did that to me once. I'm absolutely not going to do it. Well, I was kind of the other side of it. If I do this, maybe then when I want something, maybe I'll get a little bit of a favor or kickback.
Put a favor in the bank.
Right.
Sure.
I had a good enough relationship with my dispatchers. I actually, I got yelled at. I got chewed out for missing my kid's Christmas concert because the load had to go. I said, it's got to go. I called home. My family was fine with it. I said, yeah, we get it. And I took off. Well, one of my other buddies found out. He was at the same concert that I was supposed to be at, and he snitched on me, and I got yelled at. And he said, no, that load didn't have to go. I said, no, the load had to go. But I had that relationship with him that, when I needed something, I was home.
I think we did a really good job of kind of laying out the expectations and what it might look like. But let's talk a little bit about how do we make them successful? What does that look like?
Oh boy, I mean, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And I don't think sometimes students fully understand that it's a performance-driven pay. The harder you work, the more you're going to make. These dollar figures that they're shooting at you doesn't come from the guy that stops at every truck stop, takes a 3-hour nap every afternoon. These are guys that are out there and they're go-getters. They're self-driven. And I think that's an eye-opener to some of them. You've got to get out. You got to be very disciplined out there. No one's going to call and give you that wake-up call and say, it's time to go to work, son. You've got to do that yourself. You've got to be responsible. If you want that kind of pay.
Yeah, and my dad raised me. He says, work first, worry about the pay later.
Yeah.
If you're working for a good company, you do an honest day's work,
they're going to take care of you.
They will. Absolutely.
Yeah,
they will. That's the biggest thing. People get hung up on that dollar sign. Well, this load here doesn't pay well. Well, that one there doesn't. I was like, take care of the work first.
Right.
And it will fall together.
I've always, as long as I've been in trucking, I've always seen this. But the guys that are nitpicky about what they will and won't do, they kind of back themselves into a corner where they're limiting themselves and limiting their own income. But it's always been the drivers to just roll with it, have a great relationship with their dispatcher, and just, you put me on whatever you need me on, we'll make it work. Those are the guys that make the most money. They do. Right? I'm just telling you, that's how
back
it works.
to that, taking that crappy load. I've heard horror stories from dispatchers. I didn't even call him, because every time I call him, he either complains about what I'm giving him or just outright refuses it. But every time I call you, it's a pleasant interaction, and I enjoy talking to you. Well, guess what? I just got money for a load that guy didn't get just because he doesn't know how to do his job.
He was leaving it on the table.
Right.
Yep. Got in his own way.
Yep.
So, do you guys ever have like students? Tell me about a time when you had students that have gone through your program, went out into the trucking world, and come back. Any kind of success stories or anything you can share, and what made them successful?
We've got several drivers out there now that are owner operators, and I think that's one aspect of a success story to me. We also have a student that's now driver manager.
Okay.
And he started out as a student for us. He did a really good job for the company that he was with, and now he's got an office job, and he moved up. And to me, that's really the true idea of success. I started at the bottom. I started out as a student driver, and now I'm up here.
Yep.
You don't know anything about that, do you?
I might know a little something about that, but you're right. I think so many people think about, if I get my CDL, I'm always going to be a driver. There's so many opportunities in transportation logistics. You can go anywhere, and that experience you had as a driver will serve you the rest of your career.
And some people just love being a driver.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got a gal, she came through my class over 12 years ago. I see her once in a while come through town. Always a smile on her face.
Still loving it.
Absolutely loving it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I always make sure that my students get with a company that you have that opportunity, because you don't know just yet. Do I want to be a driver 20 years from now? Do I want to still be doing this even 5 years from now? But if you get with a company that you could possibly move into other roles,
yes,
that keeps your whole future open, and you're still with that same company. We don't have to job hop.
Yeah. Yeah, because who knows what's going to happen 20 years from now. But if you're in a good company,
might look a lot different, huh?
Absolutely.
Think about how much it's changed in the last 20 or 30 years from those payphone booths and everything else to where we're at now. So I'm sure it'll keep moving forward. So I know one of the things that happens when new entrants come into the industry and stuff, you got to remember that we are federally mandated when it comes to drug and alcohol screening and stuff like that. I'm curious with, how, like marijuana, for instance, is at the state level. Have you seen any issues there? Because as in trucking, we're still at the federal level with that stuff.
We have.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately. Unfortunately, the one we touch on is real close to CBD oil.
Okay.
And unfortunately, some of the CBD oil is not refined well enough. And we have had a few drivers come through that were on that and have had failed drug test. So before they come to our program, they have to get their learner's permit. And then before we land behind the wheel, they have to have a DOT, FMCSA drug screen done. And I've had them fail on that one for a number of reasons. That's usually by the one. Or sometimes it's a one party.
That one party.
Oh, yeah. We've all heard that excuse. But I think the bottom line is if you're into that kind of lifestyle,
yes,
transportation probably isn't for you. So be aware.
Drugs, alcohol, whatever it is. I mean, your life depends on that CDL and your ability to drive. This is now your career, and you've got to protect it. You've got to guard it. And a great time on a Saturday night really doesn't do you any good if you could lose your license for a year,
right,
or lose your job.
It's now how you support your kids and your spouse and things like that. So you really got to think differently once you start making your living with that CDL. Right. And just there's nothing wrong with going out and having a good time. Just make sure somebody else is driving home. Right.
Right. Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Driven Too Far, The Truth About Trucking. If you've enjoyed our episode so far, don't forget to give us a like and a 5-star review.